Right now, as you're hearing this, Mars and Uranus are pulling into alignment, and when these two collide, nothing stays the same. This is not a soft transit you feel next week, it's already moving. That restless electric pressure under your skin, that sense that the old version of your life is cracking at the edges, that you can't sit still even when nothing's wrong, that's the shockwave arriving early. And here's what it's tracking. Anyone who has been playing small, performing safety, waiting for permission to take up space, this energy finds you specifically. 3 sudden changes are building. By the end, you'll know exactly what they are. But first, here's why this hits so hard. Mars meets Uranus roughly every 2 years. That part is ordinary. What is not ordinary is where it lands this time. At 26 degrees of Taurus, one of the most charged and volatile points in the entire sky. That single degree changes everything, and here's why. Uranus has been sitting in Taurus for 7 years, quietly dismantling everything you built to feel safe. The routines, the comfort, the false stability you leaned on. Slow, almost invisible. Then Mars arrives and lights the fuse. Most transits work like a slow burn. You adjust, you barely notice, but this one is a shockwave, sudden action on suppressed freedom. Not a nudge, a break. And that exact degree, it carries a hidden signature. Something older is buried there, and it's about to surface. And here's the thing. You already know exactly what I'm describing, because you've been living it for weeks. That sudden irritability with no clear source. The way a room that once felt safe now feels too small, too still, like the walls are pressing in. The dreams of leaving, quitting, walking out, disappearing into a version of your life that doesn't require an explanation, and that flash of clarity or rage that came out of nowhere and even surprised you. Let me name what's underneath it. If you've ever managed how much of yourself gets to show up in a room, softened your voice, edited your story, performed a smaller, safer version of who you are just to keep the peace, then this pressure isn't new to you. It's the weight of shrinking yourself finally reaching its limit. Now hear me clearly. This is not instability. This is not anxiety. This is your nervous system registering a signal older than words, the signal that says it is time to move. And these feelings are not problems to solve. They are the first of 3 changes already beginning to activate. So let me name exactly what is beginning to move, because there are 3 of them, and they arrive in sequence. First, a bold statement. Something you say, send, post, or declare that you simply cannot unsay. The words that have been sitting behind your teeth for months finally come out. Second, a broken pattern, a dynamic, a routine, a way of relating that just stops working, and this time cannot be restored. Third, an unexpected opening, a door that appears precisely because you stopped blocking it by pretending. And here's why they matter as a sequence and not a list. Each one creates the conditions for the next. The statement cracks the pattern. The broken pattern reveals the door. Because Mars meeting Uranus doesn't persuade you to change. It makes staying the same cost more than moving ever could. Let me walk you through each one. But before you can recognize which of these 3 is arriving for you, you need to know where you are standing in the sequence. So let me walk you through how this energy actually moves. The before is the build-up, the pressure in the body, the low-grade restlessness, the sense that something is too tight, slightly off, wound 1 notch past comfortable. If you have been living inside that hum for weeks, that was Mars closing the distance. The during is the peak window. The conjunction goes exact, the energy goes live, and the bolt lands. This is when the statement comes out, the pattern snaps, the message arrives. It feels sudden because it is. The after is the silence, and it is a different silence. The old frame does not click back into place. You cannot unknow what you now know. Now here is why this matters right now. You are either in the build-up or already inside the peak. Either way, the next 72 hours carry it. So carry that silence into the first change, because this is where it starts to speak. Change 1 is the statement that cannot be unsaid. Here is the mechanism. Mars is the will to act, the raw forward motion in the body. Uranus is the part of you that refuses to keep suppressing what is true. Put them together and you get speech that bypasses your usual filter. The words are out before the polite version can stop them. It does not have to be dramatic. It might be a boundary said plainly, a need finally named out loud, a message sent, a role you resign from, a creative thing you post, or the quietest one of all, an admission to yourself that finally lands as real, a coming out in whatever form yours takes. And here is what nobody warns you about. It feels terrifying right before and clarifying right after. The terror is Mars. The clarity is Uranus. Both are present and always in that order. But notice something. The statement does not create the change. It simply makes the change visible. Once the true thing is said, the pattern that needed your silence can no longer hold. And once that pattern can no longer hold, it does not bend. It breaks. This is the second change. And it belongs entirely to Uranus. Here is the mechanism. Uranus does not wear things down slowly. It reveals all at once that a load-bearing wall in your life was never structural at all. It only looks solid because nothing had ever pushed against it. This transit pushes. So watch for the pattern that required a smaller version of you. The heterosexual comfort you performed at the family table. The way you measured how much of your gender got to show up in a room. The relationship that worked on paper but asked you to disappear a little every day. The friendship where you were only ever the acceptable edit of yourself. One of those is breaking now. And here is what nobody prepares you for. It can feel like grief and relief in the same breath. You are allowed both. A cage is still something you lived inside, and leaving it can ache. But understand this. You did not break the pattern. The pattern broke under the weight of who you have already become. That is not damage. That is growth finally catching up. And where the wall stood, there is now an opening. And here is what the opening does not do. It does not send you a warning. It does not schedule itself. Uranus openings arrive sideways, as a conversation you almost skipped, an invitation that makes no logical sense, a coincidence too precise to be random, or a quiet knowing that suddenly the coordinates of what you want have moved. Let me tell you how it may show up. A collaboration you never pitched, a creative spark you thought had gone cold, a community that receives all of you, with no performance tax, no acceptable edit, no smaller version required. A connection that does not ask you to disappear. A professional direction that only became possible the moment you stopped managing your identity for the room. Here is how you recognize it. It feels almost suspiciously right. The path forward feels easier than the life you just left. And it tends to arrive within days of the bold word you spoke and the wall that fell. Now understand what just happened. These were never three separate events. You spoke, the structure broke, the door appeared. One sequence, one shockwave doing exactly what it was built to do. The old timeline is behind you. What waits on the other side is what we turn to next. But why here? Why this exact patch of sky? Let me show you the hidden key, because this conjunction does not land in empty space. It lands near Algol, the fixed star burning at 26 degrees of Taurus, one of the most charged points in the entire heavens. Traditional astrology called Algol the most feared star in the sky, the star of Medusa, the severed head. And here is what almost no one tells you. Medusa was never a monster. She was a being punished for a power others could not tolerate, silenced, made grotesque, then weaponized against her will. That is Algol's true frequency, not destruction, the fury of the suppressed finally becoming visible. And if you have lived under a gaze that demanded you be smaller, if you have performed an acceptable version of yourself just to move through a room safely, then these themes are not myth to you. They are memory. They are the exact wound that this transit reaches. So understand what is really happening. This shockwave is not installing something foreign in you. It is activating what was always there and simply could not move until now. Which is why what surfaces next feels less like change and more like recognition. So what does that recognition actually look like once the shockwave has moved through you? Quieter than you expect. You walk into a room and notice you are no longer managing yourself, no longer softening your voice or shrinking to fit. A relationship that once felt necessary now feels obviously optional. You make a choice without the usual internal negotiation, and something that used to spike anxiety now hands you clarity instead. But here is the thing. This does not always feel like triumph. Sometimes it feels like standing in a newly cleared space, unsure what to build. That disorientation is not failure. It is the room the old pattern used to occupy. You are not the person who was watching the sky a month ago. The surface may look similar, but your internal coordinates have shifted, and that shift is permanent. So the question is no longer whether it happened. It is what you do with the opening. So hear this clearly. Mars and Uranus did not break you. They broke the container you were performing inside. If you have spent years making yourself small, the shockwave was aimed there. Comment break free if you feel it. Subscribe for what opens next.